The Tampa Bay Lightning are one win away from advancing to the Stanley Cup Final. We've got that covered, plus free agents from the final four teams and who's going to fill these coaching vacancies. All that and more coming up on the Friday edition of the Locked On NHL podcast.
You're Locked On NHL, your daily podcast on the National Hockey League. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And happy Friday, everybody, and welcome to the weekend edition of the Locked On NHL podcast. I'm Gil Martin, and with me, as always, every Friday, Rachel Donner. Rachel, we made it to another weekend.
We did, and man, we're getting so close to the end here. So close.
Yeah, we are possibly one game away from knowing the two teams that will be in the Stanley Cup Final. First, want to thank everybody for making Locked On NHL your first listen every day. We are free and available on all platforms. And yeah, we're getting to the time of year where there's only three teams left in the hunt for the Stanley Cup. And yeah, the end is just around the corner. We're going to go through some hockey withdrawal soon.
Yeah, offseason is always weird, and you end up counting down the days until October again. But we still got a Stanley Cup to play, so I'm very excited for that.
We do, and then we have the draft and free agency and all that exciting stuff. And look, the good news is, out of all of the four major North American team sports, hockey has the shortest offseason most of the time. So, that there is that to look forward to.
Yeah, and, we are still obviously knee-deep in the conference finals on the Eastern side of things. And, when we were talking last week, we were saying, oh, what is Tampa going to do to get back in this series? And they were down 2-0. Lo and behold, they are up 3-2 after last night's win over the Rangers at Madison Square Garden, which was pretty fun to watch.
Yeah, that was a fun game, and that was the first loss at home for the Rangers in this postseason. And, to me, I think about it, we should have known that the Lightning were not going to just go away, down 2-0. Here's a team, they won back-to-back Stanley Cups for a reason, and they just dug in and really turned the momentum of the series around. And looking back at it, last night's game was almost like a microcosm of the series. They were down 1-0, but they answered, and now they've overtaken the Rangers and have a chance to close it out at home. What do you think, Rachel, was sort of the difference last night between these two teams?
First of all, you get a really phenomenal game from Mikhail Sergachev, who it's good that Tampa has depth like that, and goal and an assist in that game, including the assist on that game winner that Andre Palat redirected. And I think that ultimately what they're doing right is creating screens in front of Shesterkin, because that's the only way you're going to beat him, right? And so they're creating these double screens that are just making it so he can't see where the puck is coming from. And lo and behold, that's what led to the game-winning goal for me. And I think that's really been the key.
Yeah, that has been a very good strategy that they've employed, and it worked to perfection last night, as you mentioned, on the game winner. And then on the other side of the ice, I think they've done a fairly good job of reducing some of the Rangers' speed, slowing them down in the neutral zone, not letting them come into the attacking zone with momentum. And that really is one of the keys to the Rangers offense.
Yeah, it has been really noticeable in the last couple of games, especially that the Rangers just haven't been able to attack on the rush with the kind of abandon that they did in the first couple of games in the series. And I want to, give all the credit to Tampa here, but the Rangers, played a really solid game last night as well. I think that, you have to give that team a lot of credit. I think this whole playoffs has been a really good coming out party for Keandre Miller, and he continues to play really well. And Trouba and Fox combined for 9 blocked shots in this game, just between the two of them. So they're doing everything they can defensively to try and stop this powerhouse Tampa Bay Lightning team. And, it was just kind of like something had to give at some point. And in this case, the scales tipped in Tampa's favor.
Yeah, you do get the feeling that most of these games in this series, the first 5 and now 6 and 7, if necessary, they're going to go down to the wire. We're not going to see a 5-0 kind of a game in this series. And both teams playing at a very high level. I have to give credit. Everyone talks about Fox. Oh, he's such a good offensive defenseman, but he is paying the price. He's not just sitting back and doing the pretty stuff. And those block shots really sort of illustrate the kind of game he's playing when the stakes are the highest. So I have to give credit where credit is due.
Absolutely. I think that he is kind of, I would say, the leader of the young kids on the Rangers team. Everybody talks about how young they are overall, but he just plays like a veteran out there. And I think that adds a lot to what the Rangers can do. And it's just so important, again, when you're playing a team like Tampa, who has that pedigree and that experience, to be able to be calm out there and know that he is dependable on the defensive side of things.
Yeah, absolutely. And then gotta say that, we talked before this series started about the great goaltending matchup, Vasilevsky against Shesterkin. Both of those goalies, they were great last night, and they've come through really throughout this series.
Oh, yeah. And it's just the little things, too. I mean, with Shesterkin, there was, I think it was in the second period of the game last night, where he came out to play the puck and then fired it right toward the Tampa bench just as they were making a line change, and it created a too much man penalty. And the Rangers got a power play out of it. And it's just the little stuff like that while he plays really well in net, he's also able to create opportunities for the team overall.
Yeah, and in a tight series like this where the two teams are so evenly matched, those little things can make a big difference. And it is, like you said, a double screen here, a deflection there, a penalty, a bounce. This is such a tight series. I am enjoying watching these two teams go at it. And whichever team survives, you almost have to wonder, how much this series will take out of them when they go and face a tough opponent like the Colorado Avalanche.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, obviously, we saw in the Western Conference Series, the Avalanche, it had a little bit of rustiness in that first game against the Oilers, so they could run into the same problem there. I'm excited for that series, no matter who is the opponent in the end, because I think the Avs are I think finally they've reached this point where it feels like they should have maybe over the last couple of years, and they finally are at the mountaintop, so to speak, in the mountainous state of Colorado. But I do think that both of these teams, the Rangers and Tampa Bay Lightning, would be worthy opponents in a series like that. One thing that was kind of interesting to me, Andrei Vasilevsky, this was his 60th career playoff win, and it just feels like that is a huge number. Don't get me wrong, but if you look at the top two overall, Patrick Waugh had 151 and Martin Brodeur 113. I just don't feel like goalies are ever going to get up to that level anymore. Just the way goalies are used and kind of wear down right now. I don't know. What do you think about that?
Yeah, it's not going to be easy. And, the style that they play now, it's like goalies have to get their hips taken care of every 6 or 7 years.
Right.
It's like maintenance, right? So that makes it a little more difficult. But I'll tell you, Vasilevsky, I mean, he's not old yet. I mean, he's still got lots of years to add to those numbers if the team around him continues to be as talented, as it is. But he's not even halfway there to the all-time leader, and that's hard to believe. But the other thing is, wow, he got to 60 really quickly, didn't he?
He did. He really did. He will definitely hit 100 playoff games played if Tampa advances to the Stanley Cup Final. So he's currently at 97 right now. So it will take them making the Stanley Cup Final for him to hit that 100 games. But yeah, 60 wins in about 100 playoff games. That's pretty good.
Yeah, not bad at all, winning almost 2 out of 3. So, yeah, not
considering bad. They got swept by Columbus that one time, right?
Yeah, exactly. Just add that to the pile, right? So, it's and look, two Stanley Cups with a chance to still possibly get a third this year. That's one of those runs. I'm trying to think of the last time a goalie went to 3 straight Stanley Cup Finals. It's been a while.
It has, but I had been kind of bitter about it, saying, "Oh, I like it when there's new teams winning, and I don't want Tampa to win a third time." But now I'm kind of getting into it a little bit. So sorry if that curses Tampa at this point, but now I'm like, oh, no, it is kind of really a good accomplishment, and they should go for it. So I'm here for whoever wins at this point.
There you go. Well, we have got a lot more to come on this episode. We'll talk about the final 4 teams this year and some of the unrestricted free agents they have on their rosters, plus coaching vacancies around the league. But first, Rachel, why don't you talk to us about BetOnline?
BetOnline.net is your number one source for all your betting needs and sports information. You can find all the latest odds, news, and sports development, including this year's basketball championship matchup, the NHL Conference Finals, Major League Baseball, and of course, all the latest fighting news from MMA and boxing to UFC. BetOnline is your continued source for all your sports wagering information, from live betting to esports and more. Head to their website today or use your mobile device. You can learn all about all the trends in action. BetOnline, where the game starts.
And we have an important favor to ask you. We've put together a survey so we can learn more about our listeners like you and make your favorite Locked On podcasts even better. This is an opportunity to tell us what you like and don't like about Locked On Podcasts. So go to lockedonpodcast.com/survey right now to get started. It won't take very long, and everyone that completes a survey can qualify for a chance to win one of 10 $100 Ticketmaster gift cards. To take our audience survey, go to lockedonpodcast.com/survey, and thanks for your help. So, Rachel, the final 4 teams, we're looking toward the offseason now, and there are a number of, these teams have a number of potential free agents who could really impact what they do next season. And let's start with the Tampa Bay Lightning. They're already over the projected cap for next year.
They are. I think they are, along with the Vegas Golden Knights, the team that has monkeyed with the cap the most and kind of made things work in creative ways over the last couple of seasons. And it has worked for Tampa. I mean, obviously, we just talked about they've won 2 cups in a row. They're on the precipice of maybe getting to their 3rd Stanley Cup Final. So whatever they're doing is working. And I have no complaints about, working within the system and using loopholes. Like, that's your prerogative in terms of how you're going to manage your roster and your cap situation. And, I think that they're going to run into some problems, obviously, in this offseason with having, they have a 1st round draft pick this year, but they have no 2nd or 3rd round draft pick. They have no 1st round draft picks for the following 2 seasons because they traded them away. And so I think that in free agency, like, they're going to have to make some serious trades in order to make room for free agents if that's what they're choosing to do. And I think the big name there is Andre Palat. Again, game-winning goal scorer from last night. And he's just doing all the things you need to do in order to increase his value. And it's going to be tough for them to re-sign him.
It is. They'd have to do a lot of juggling in order to do that, and we'll see whether or not they're able to do it. Edmonton, not as many big names in free agent, but a couple of them still out there for them.
Yeah, I think obviously the big question for the Oilers is Evander Kane, because they kind of like took a chance on him and he did really well for them, but also he got suspended after an egregious play that injured Nazem Kadri on the Avalanche. And so, you look at the fact that he got 39 points in 43 games, he got 13 goals in the playoffs. Is he somebody you want to keep around? And it's a good question. I do think, from a hockey perspective, in terms of output, Evander Kane kind of earned the right to, negotiate on his own behalf. But at the same time, he's still pretty problematic. And so,
especially off the ice.
Yeah. And given that it was another, season where the Oilers could only go so far, what is their strategy going to be going into next season? They also have some RFA issues going on. That's kind of a separate issue in terms of Kyler Yamamoto and Jesse Puljujarvi, and it's likely they're only going to be able to keep one of those two. Right. So all of this is going to work together to figure out what are they going to do with Evander Kane.
Yeah, gonna be interesting to see how they play that one this offseason. The Rangers have more cap space available, but a few of their players, first of all, backup goalie Alexander Georgiev is a restricted free agent, but Ryan Strome, Tyler Mott, there's some names there that, they don't probably want to lose. And
Andrew Kopp.
Yeah, big time. So the Rangers, they have a lot of decisions to make as well.
Yeah, and I would add to that list Frank Vetrano, who they got through, I think it was at the deadline, if I recall correctly.
Yes,
but
I think so.
He has contributed, I think, pretty stealthily but effectively to that team. And are they going to want to keep him around? Is he going to want to stick around with this team that has kind of exceeded expectations? And, are any of these guys going to give the Rangers team-friendly deals? The Rangers, I think, are a team that aren't in cap trouble by any stretch of the imagination. And they certainly have some, deadline pickups that they could let go, such as Justin Braun. So they do have room. And, their projected cap space right now is about $13.5 million. So they have some space to work with here. It's just a matter of what strategy they're going to take, depending on how this season plays out in the end, and how much do they want to go all in on next season.
Yeah. And there are some decisions they're going to have to make with regard to that. But obviously for Ranger fans, game 6 is a little bit more on the front burner right now. Now, it's interesting.
Well, for the rest of us, though, who are kind of looking at free agents in terms of who we might like to go after, I think it's important for the rest of us. We're all like vultures circling around, right?
Circling, yes, absolutely. And then there's the Colorado Avalanche. They have more available cap space than the other 3 teams who were still in the conference final, but they probably have more players who they need to address in unrestricted free agency, including starting goaltender Darcy Kemper, Andrei Burakovsky, Andrew Cogliano, Nazem Kadri. There are some, Valerie Nichushkin. There are some big names out there, and it'll be whether they win the cup or not. This is a lot of decisions coming up right now for the Avalanche and Joe Sakic.
Yeah, I would add Josh Manson to that list as well. I think that's an important kind of middle piece for them as far as what has led to some of their success. And this has sort of been, I think, an all-in season for them this year. And again, looking at, they don't have a first round or second round draft pick this year because of all the moves they've made to get to this point. And should they not win the Stanley Cup, they're still going to be in a little bit of a difficult situation. Again, they do have a lot of cap space to work with, but at the same time, they can't sign everybody. That is a very long list of players, very expensive players at that. And it seems like from what we know now, Nazem Kadri, though he's hurt right now, is going to test the open market. We don't know, obviously, for sure, but it seems like that's the direction he's going in. And he could command up to, $11 million a season, given the production that he had this past year, which, I don't know if that's the right amount for him, given that it's kind of a one shot. Like he really took a big step forward in a contract year.
Right.
That was kind of an outlier season for him. So for me, I think he's more like an 8 million guy, but I think that's a huge payout nonetheless. And they may be in a situation where they're stuck kind of choosing between a Burakovsky and a Nichushkin in terms of who they want to make the effort to keep around and who's going to go on the open market. And I personally would like Nichushkin out on the market, but we can't have everything we want. But I do think that they're going to have a lot of work to do this offseason to try and Jenga what their roster is going to look like next year, Stanley Cup or no Stanley Cup.
It is going to be tough. A lot of tough decisions for Joe Sakic. And this is a team that's in win mode now. And, you talk about, 8 million here and 6 million. That cap space that they have, it's going to go away in a hurry once they start signing some of these players, and not going to be able to keep everyone. There's no question about that.
Yeah. It's like I said, it's fun for the rest of us to try and poach some of these really solid players that could contribute to our teams.
Absolutely. We have got more to discuss on today's show. Coaching vacancies around the league. We'll break down some of the available positions and available coaches, all that and more still to come on this episode of the Locked On NHL podcast. So, Rachel, we do have some job openings still out there, including a certain team that you cover, the Philadelphia Flyers. Let's start in Philadelphia. What is going on there? We know Mike Yao not coming back. So what is the opening looking like? What have you heard about some of the candidates that the Flyers may be looking at?
We know they've talked to Barry Trotz, but I'm not sure that they've had a formal interview there yet. And I think he would be a leading candidate for them. But the thing with Barry Trotz is that, as you know, he wants to get into management eventually, and that might be a roadblock with a team like the Flyers, because Chuck Fletcher and the rest of the gang in management, I think, want to keep their jobs. So, I'm not sure how that would go. But we also know that John Tortorella interviewed with the team, and according to Frank Saravelli, he will be part of any second round process unless they decide to go with somebody right away, make a snap judgment decision, which I do not think will happen. That is not the Flyers and Chuck Fletcher's way right now. We know that David Quinn interviewed there. David Quinn also interviewed with the Red Wings, I believe. I'm not too keen on it, honestly, with David Quinn. I think that the only upside to a guy like him is that he could have that second NHL job success that some guys have, where he made the jump from college hockey to the NHL, did some good things, failed in other areas, and maybe he just learned a lot. And so his second gig, he would take a step forward, which is a distinct possibility. But again, I don't think he's super high on my list particularly. Bruce Cassidy, on the other hand, absolutely higher on my list. Proven success. He's going to have a massive chip on his shoulder this season.
Oh, yeah.
And I think that is motivation enough for me to have him in the East, with the Bruins also in the East, and him wanting to just steamroll over everybody that fired him. And he's honestly, he's a good motivator as well. So
were you surprised that they let him go?
Yes and no. I think from a logical perspective, yes, but knowing management and ownership in Boston, it's not surprising that they would do something like this.
Yeah, I mean, he's coming off a 107-point season. Not like they struggled this year, and yet, never missed the playoffs. I don't think Cassidy, if he wants a job, I don't think he'll be out of one for very long.
No, and he said, in fact, that he does want a job. So I think that the Flyers would be doing a disservice to themselves if they did not at least talk to him.
Agreed. You mentioned Barry Trotz. The job he's been most rumored to be looking at is Winnipeg. He's from that area, and we know Winnipeg would be interested. I also know Dave Lowry, who was the interim coach. He's going to get an interview for that job as well. The Jets, they weren't a bad team. They weren't that far off the pace. That's an interesting opening, I think.
Yeah, I think so too, just because they've sort of been languishing in the muddy middle for a while with, moments of, oh, maybe they can go somewhere and then they don't. And I think that a change behind the bench to a guy like Trotz would give them all the opportunity in the world to move in that better direction. I mean, obviously, given that the roster can handle it, but I do think that the Jets are an interesting team to watch.
And Vegas still has an opening. Peter DeBoer let go after they missed the playoffs for the first time in the history of that franchise.
And he's probably going to Dallas.
Yeah,
is the latest there. So
I heard that rumor as well, and Dallas, kind of a team at a crossroads. That's a job that you sort of have to figure out that sweet spot. They've got some older veterans, some younger guys. I think management and then the new coach is going to have to sit down and sort of figure out what direction the team really wants to go in.
Yeah, I actually wouldn't have minded if Pete DeBoer at least got a shot in Philly with an interview, because I do think that Vegas was an unusual situation, let's say, with it being an expansion team and having such early success, but with them, messing with the roster and the cap and making rash moves. I think that given a chance to turn around a franchise like the Flyers would have been a really good opportunity for him. Again, not my top choice, but I think that I wouldn't have complained, I think, if they had gone with him. But I think Dallas is in a similar situation, although albeit with much greater or better results in the last couple of years than the Flyers. So I can see why it would be a more attractive place for him to go.
So before we go, we have one game this weekend, Saturday, Game 6. Your parting thoughts on whether we see Game 7?
I certainly hope we do. I mean, that's the dream, is a Game 7 with a trip to the Stanley Cup Final on the line. So I hope we do get to the Game 7 for this series. It would be back at Madison Square Garden. Very exciting. As long as we don't have all those cutaways to celebrities and Timothée Chalamet hiding underneath seats. But
you will. Well, don't worry about that. But I mean, look, if we get to a Game 7, the Garden will be rocking. I mean, that'll be an intense atmosphere. But the Rangers have to win on the road, and Tampa has played. I mean, the key for the Rangers is to try to get back some of the momentum. If they can pull off the upset in Game 6 and get Game 7 back at the Garden, that's a whole different story. But Tampa's going to be tough at home. No question about that.
Yeah, I am looking forward to it. That's for sure.
Absolutely. All right, that's going to do it for this episode of the Locked On NHL podcast. I will be back on Monday with 3 of our local experts to break down either Game 7 or start talking about the Stanley Cup Final matchup, maybe a little bit of both. We'll see about that. But have a great weekend, everybody, and thanks again for listening to the Locked On NHL podcast.